there are days when you wake up already feeling behind, already carrying something heavy you can't quite name. It's not just the tasks ahead, it's the quiet pressure, the need to control, to fix, to hold everything together. And in that effort, something inside you tightens. You push through, you manage, you survive, but you don't feel at ease. Control often feels like strength. It gives the impression that you are prepared, responsible, and capable of handling whatever comes your way. But if you look closely, control is rarely born from confidence. More often, it grows quietly out of fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of being hurt, or even fear of being seen as not enough. It becomes a shield you carry, convincing yourself that if you can just manage everything perfectly, nothing will go wrong. This kind of control doesn't usually announce itself loudly. It shows up in subtle ways, in the need to plan every detail, in the discomfort when things don't go as expected, in the anxiety that arises when life feels unpredictable. You may find yourself constantly thinking ahead, trying to prevent problems that haven't even happened yet. And while it may seem like you're being proactive, there is often an underlying tension driving it all. That tension is fear. Fear tells you that if you don't stay in control, everything might fall apart. It whispers that you are responsible for outcomes that were never fully yours to carry. It convinces you that letting go is dangerous, that trust is risky, and that surrender is weakness. Over time, this fear-based control becomes exhausting. It drains your energy because you are trying to hold together something that was never meant to be held so tightly. When you operate from control, you are constantly on guard. You measure, calculate, and adjust, always trying to stay one step ahead. But life doesn't work that way. No matter how much you plan, there will always be unexpected moments. And when those moments come, the illusion of control begins to crack, often leaving you feeling overwhelmed or defeated. The deeper truth is that control is not solving your fear, it is feeding it. Every time you try to control everything, you reinforce the belief that you are not safe without that control. You tell yourself again and again that things must go your way in order for you to feel okay. And that belief keeps you trapped in a cycle where peace feels just out of reach. But there is another way of seeing this. What if the urge to control is not a sign that you need to try harder, but a signal that something inside you needs attention? What if, instead of tightening your grip, you paused and asked yourself what you are truly afraid of? Because beneath the need to control, there is often a deeper emotional experience waiting to be acknowledged: uncertainty, vulnerability, or even past pain that hasn't fully healed. When you begin to recognize this, control starts to lose its power. Not because you force it away, but because you understand it. You see that it's not your strength, it's your defense. And once you see it clearly, you can begin to respond differently. You can begin to loosen your grip, even if just a little. You can allow moments where you don't have all the answers. You can sit with uncertainty without immediately trying to fix it. And in those moments, something shifts. The constant pressure begins to ease, and you create space for a different experience, one that is not driven by fear, but by trust. This doesn't mean you stop caring or stop taking responsibility. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to control in the first place. It means recognizing that you can show up fully, do your part, and still allow life to unfold in ways you cannot predict. And in that space where control begins to soften, you may start to feel something unfamiliar yet deeply natural, a quiet sense of relief. As if you no longer have to fight so hard to hold everything together. Surrender is often misunderstood. It is commonly seen as giving up, as losing control, or as stepping back from responsibility. But in truth, surrender is not about defeat, it is about release. It is the conscious decision to stop resisting what you cannot control and to soften your grip on the constant need to force outcomes. And in that release, something unexpected begins to happen. Space opens up within you. Most of the time, the mind is crowded. It is filled with worries about the future, regrets about the past, and endless calculations about how things should unfold. This constant mental noise leaves very little room for peace. You may not even notice how tense you are because it has become your normal state. The pressure to manage everything, to anticipate every possibility, creates a kind of inner tightness that you carry throughout your day. When you choose surrender, even in a small way, you interrupt that pattern. You stop arguing with reality. Instead of asking, why is this happening? Or, how can I fix this immediately? You begin to accept the moment as it is. This acceptance does not mean you agree with everything or that you stop taking action. It simply means you are no longer fighting the present moment. And that shift alone can create a surprising sense of relief. Because resistance is heavy. It takes energy to push against what is already here. It takes effort to deny, avoid, or control every outcome. And when that resistance drops even slightly, the weight begins to lift. You may feel it as a subtle calm, a quiet pause, or a sense that you can finally breathe more freely. This is the space that surrender creates. In that space, your mind becomes clearer. When you are no longer overwhelmed by fear or urgency, you can see things more objectively. Your thoughts slow down and your reactions become less impulsive. Instead of being driven by anxiety, you begin to respond with awareness. This clarity allows you to make decisions that are more aligned, more thoughtful and less reactive. Surrender also opens the door to emotional peace. When you are constantly trying to control everything, your emotions tend to fluctuate with every outcome. If things go your way, you feel relief. If they don't, you feel frustration, disappointment, or even anger. But when you surrender, you begin to detach your inner state from external circumstances. You are no longer entirely dependent on how things turn out in order to feel okay. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings are no longer overwhelming or consuming. You allow them to exist without letting them define you. And in doing so, you create a sense of stability within yourself that is not easily shaken. There is also a deeper dimension to surrender, one that connects to trust. When you let go of the need to control everything, you begin to acknowledge that there is something beyond your limited perspective. You start to trust that not everything needs to be figured out immediately. That some things can unfold in their own time. This trust is not blind or passive. It is grounded in the understanding that life is not entirely within your control, and that trying to force it often leads to more struggle. As you practice surrender, even in small moments, you may notice that your body begins to relax. The tension in your shoulders softens, your breathing becomes deeper, and your mind feels less cluttered. These physical shifts reflect the inner space that is being created. And within that space, there is room for peace, not the kind of peace that depends on everything going perfectly, but a quieter, more stable kind of peace that comes from within, a sense that even if things are uncertain, you don't have to carry the burden of controlling every part of it. Trust is often spoken about as if it appears first, as if you simply decide to trust and then everything else follows. But in reality, trust doesn't come before letting go. It comes through letting go. It is not something you can force yourself to feel while still holding tightly to control. It develops gradually in the spaces you create when you loosen your grip on how life must unfold. Most people try to trust while still clinging to certainty. They want reassurance before they release control. They want guarantees before they allow themselves to relax. But that approach keeps them stuck, because trust cannot grow in an environment where everything is tightly managed. It needs openness. It needs uncertainty. It needs the willingness to step into the unknown without immediate answers. Letting go, even in small ways, is where this process begins. It might start with something simple, choosing not to overthink a situation, allowing a conversation to unfold naturally instead of rehearsing every word, or accepting that not every outcome can be predicted. These moments may feel uncomfortable at first. There can be a sense of vulnerability, as if you are stepping outside of something familiar. And that discomfort is natural, because you are moving away from control, which once felt like safety. But as you continue to let go, something shifts. You begin to notice that not everything falls apart when you release control. Situations resolve themselves in ways you didn't expect. Conversations flow more naturally. Problems that once felt overwhelming become manageable. These experiences may be subtle, but they are important. They show you, not through theory, but through direct experience, that you don't need to hold everything together for life to continue. And this is where trust starts to take root. It is not built on blind belief, but on repeated evidence that you are okay even when you are not in full control. Each time you let go and see that things still move forward, Your confidence grows not in your ability to control, but in your ability to handle whatever comes. Trust also deepens your relationship with uncertainty. Instead of seeing the unknown as something threatening, you begin to see it as something neutral, even necessary. Life is constantly unfolding, and much of it exists beyond your awareness. When you stop trying to predict every outcome, you allow yourself to experience life more fully, rather than constantly preparing for it. There is a quiet shift from anticipation to presence. This doesn't mean you stop planning or stop being responsible. It means you no longer rely on control as your primary source of security. You still take action, you still make decisions, but you do so with a lighter grip. You understand that your role is to participate, not to dictate every result. There is also a deeper emotional layer to this process. Letting go requires you to face vulnerability. It asks you to sit with the possibility that things may not go as you hope. And in doing so, it challenges the belief that you need certainty to feel safe. Over time, as you move through this vulnerability without being overwhelmed by it, your sense of inner stability, if it is strengthened, you begin to realize that trust is not about knowing what will happen. It is about knowing that you can meet whatever happens. And this realization changes the way you move through your day. You become less reactive, less anxious about outcomes, and more grounded in the present moment. Your decisions come from a place of clarity rather than fear. You no longer feel the constant need to brace yourself against uncertainty because you have learned through experience that letting go does not weaken you, yet supports you in ways control never could trust. Then is not something you wait for before you release control. It is something that quietly grows every time you choose to let go, every time you allow life to unfold without trying to force it into a fixed shape, every time you step back and realize that even without holding everything together, you are still standing. There is a quiet belief that many people carry without ever questioning it, that their worth is tied to how much they can handle, how much they can manage, and how well they can keep everything together. It shows up in the pressure to stay productive, to solve every problem, to be reliable at all times. On the surface, this can look like strength, but underneath, it often creates a deep sense of strain, as if your value depends on never dropping anything. You begin to measure yourself through your responsibilities. If the day goes well, if everything is completed, if others are satisfied, you feel a sense of validation. But when things don't go as planned, when tasks remain unfinished, when situations slip out of your control, when you feel overwhelmed, that sense of worth can quickly fade. It becomes conditional, dependent on outcomes that are not always within your control. This creates a cycle that is difficult to sustain. The more you rely on managing everything to feel worthy, the more pressure you place on yourself. You may push beyond your limits, ignore your own needs, and carry burdens that were never meant for you alone. And even when you succeed in holding everything together, the relief is temporary. It doesn't last because the underlying belief remains unchanged, that you must continue performing at that level to maintain your sense of value. Over time, this can lead to exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, but emotional and mental fatigue as well. You are constantly proving yourself, constantly trying to meet expectations, both external and internal. There is very little room to simply exist without doing, without achieving, without managing. And in that constant effort, you may lose touch with a deeper understanding of who you are beyond your roles and responsibilities. Your worth becomes something you chase rather than something you recognize. But worth is not something that can be earned through constant management. It is not a reward for being productive or capable. It does not increase when you do more, and it does not decrease when you do less. It exists independently of how much you accomplish in a day. When you begin to see this, even slightly, something starts to shift. You may notice that the pressure to control everything begins to soften. Not because your responsibilities disappear, but because they are no longer tied to your identity. You can still show up, still contribute, still care about what you do, but without the constant need to prove that you are enough. This shift allows you to relate to your day differently. Instead of approaching everything with the mindset that you must handle it perfectly, you begin to approach it with presence and intention. You do what you can with the energy you have, and you allow that to be sufficient. There is less urgency, less self-criticism, and more acceptance of your own limits. Recognizing that your worth is not defined by how much you manage also creates space for rest. Rest is often seen as something you earn after completing everything. But when your worth is tied to productivity, rest can feel undeserved. You may find it difficult to slow down without feeling guilty, as if you are falling behind or not doing enough. When you separate your value from your output, rest becomes something natural rather than something you have to justify. This understanding also changes how you respond to challenges. When things don't go as planned, you are less likely to see it as a reflection of your inadequacy. Instead of immediately blaming yourself or feeling like you have failed, you can acknowledge that not everything is within your control. You can respond with patience rather than harsh judgment. And in that shift, there is a quiet sense of freedom. You are no longer defined by how much you can carry. You are no longer bound to the idea that you must constantly manage everything to be enough. You begin to experience yourself beyond your achievements, beyond your responsibilities, beyond the constant need to prove your worth to yourself or to others. Stillness is often overlooked because it does not demand attention in the same way that noise does. It is quiet, subtle, and easily pushed aside by the constant movement of daily life. Most people move from one task to another, filling every moment with activity, distraction, or thought. In that continuous motion, there is very little room left for stillness to exist. And yet, it is within stillness that something deeper begins to unfold. When your mind is constantly active, planning, worrying, analyzing, it becomes difficult to hear anything beyond your own thoughts. There is a kind of internal noise that takes over, convincing you that every problem must be solved immediately, that every uncertainty requires an answer right now. This urgency keeps you engaged, but it also keeps you disconnected from a deeper sense of clarity. Stillness interrupts that pattern. It is not about doing more. It is about allowing yourself to pause even briefly without trying to fill the space. This can feel unfamiliar at first. When you stop moving, when you stop distracting yourself, you may become more aware of your thoughts and emotions. Things that were previously pushed aside may begin to surface. This can be uncomfortable, and it is often the reason why people avoid stillness altogether. But if you stay with it, without trying to escape or control what arises, something begins to shift. The initial restlessness starts to settle. Your thoughts, which once felt overwhelming, begin to slow down. You are no longer caught in every passing idea or worry. Instead, you observe them with a bit more distance. This shift from being immersed in your thoughts to simply noticing them creates a sense of space within your mind. And in that space, clarity begins to emerge. Clarity does not come from forcing answers or overanalyzing situations. It arises naturally when the noise quiets down. You begin to see things more simply, without the layers of fear or urgency that once clouded your perspective. If it is decisions that once felt complicated, may start to feel more straightforward. Not because the situation has changed, but because your relationship to it has shifted. There is also a deeper dimension to stillness, one that connects to guidance. When you are constantly trying to control everything, you rely solely on your conscious mind. But your awareness extends beyond that. There is a quieter, more intuitive part of you that is often drowned out by constant thinking. Stillness allows that part to come forward. This is where a sense of guidance can begin to take shape. It does not usually appear as a loud voice or a dramatic realization. It is often subtle, a feeling, a gentle sense of knowing, a quiet clarity about what feels right. This kind of guidance cannot be accessed through force. It requires openness, patience, and a willingness to listen without expectation. Stillness also affects your body. When your mind slows down, your body begins to respond. The tension that you carry, often without noticing, starts to release. Your breathing becomes deeper, your muscles relax, and there is a sense of ease that replaces the constant tightness. This physical relaxation supports the mental and emotional shifts that are taking place. Over time, as you allow more moments of stillness into your day, you may notice that you are less reactive. You are not immediately pulled into every thought or emotion. There is a pause between what happens and how you respond. And in that pause, there is choice. You can respond with awareness rather than habit, with intention rather than impulse. Stillness does not remove challenges or uncertainty. Life continues to move, situations continue to arise, and not everything becomes easy, but your experience of it changes. You are no longer caught in the constant rush of trying to keep up with everything. Instead, you begin to move through your day with a different kind of presence, one that is not driven by urgency, but supported by a quiet awareness that beneath all the movement, there is a steady place within you where clarity and guidance can always be found. Letting go is often misunderstood because it appears on the surface like weakness. It can look like stepping back, like not fighting hard enough, like allowing things to happen without resistance. In a world that constantly emphasizes control, effort, and persistence, the idea of letting go can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. It challenges the belief that strength is measured by how tightly you hold on. But what if that belief is incomplete? What if true strength is not found in gripping harder, but in knowing when to release? Holding on requires tension. It demands constant effort to maintain control over situations, people, and outcomes. You monitor, you adjust, you push, trying to ensure that everything unfolds according to your expectations. And while this may create a temporary sense of stability, it often comes at a cost. The more tightly you hold on, the more pressure you create within yourself. This pressure doesn't just stay in your mind. It shows up in your body, in your emotions, in your overall state of being. There is a constant sense of alertness, as if you must always be prepared for something to go wrong. You may feel restless, unable to fully relax, because letting your guard down feels risky. Letting go, in contrast, requires a different kind of strength. It asks you to face uncertainty without immediately trying to control it. It asks you to accept that not everything can be managed, predicted, or shaped according to your will. And this acceptance is not passive. It is an active, conscious choice to release the struggle against what is beyond your control. This is where alignment begins to take form. When you let go, you are no longer forcing yourself against the natural flow of life. Instead of pushing in directions that create resistance, you begin to move with a sense of ease. This does not mean that everything becomes effortless or that challenges disappear. It means that your actions are no longer driven by fear or desperation. There is a subtle but important shift here. When you are aligned, your decisions feel less conflicted. You are not constantly second-guessing yourself or trying to anticipate every possible outcome. There is a sense of clarity that comes from not being overwhelmed by the need to control everything. You act, but your actions come from a place of awareness rather than pressure. Letting go also changes your relationship with outcomes. When you are attached to a specific result, your emotional state becomes dependent on whether or not that result is achieved. Success brings relief, while anything else can bring disappointment or frustration. This attachment creates instability because your sense of peace is constantly tied to external circumstances. But when you let go, you loosen that attachment. You still have intentions. You still care about what happens, but you are not entirely defined by the outcome. You allow space for different possibilities, including those you did not originally consider. And in doing so, you open yourself to experiences that may be more aligned than what you initially tried to force. There is also a deeper layer to this process. Letting go requires trust not just in life, but in your ability to handle whatever comes. It asks you to step away from the belief that you must control everything in order to be safe. And as you begin to release that belief, even gradually, you may notice a sense of relief emerging. You are no longer carrying the weight of trying to manage everything. This does not mean you stop caring or stop taking responsibility. It means you begin to recognize the difference between what is yours to do and what is not. You focus your energy on your actions, your choices, your responses, while allowing the rest to unfold as it will. And in that distinction, there is a quiet form of strength. Not the kind that, if it comes from force or control, but the kind that comes from alignment, a steady, grounded way of moving through your day, where you are not constantly resisting life, but participating in it with awareness, openness, and a willingness to release what you were never meant to carry so tightly.